It's time for another episode, another entry, another installment of The Art of Dreaming with your host, Michael Hemmingson, the only guy who once punched someone in the soul. Um, Today, my theme here in The Art of Dreaming, if it fits under dreams or not, is the concept and the idea of the false flag. And I've been hearing a lot of people lately talking false flag this, false flag this. Oh, it's a false flag. Aurora's a false flag. Wisconsin's a false flag. Uh, Now, what exactly is a false flag? And we're hearing this term bandied about all over the alternative media. So I wanted to devote today's show, and it's just going to be me and anyone who wants to call in and discuss false flags. Um, about the history of false flags, where the term comes from, what does it mean when it was first used as compared to today with conspiracy theories and war and stuff like that. I'm getting someone here Skyping me, one of my sources, about possible maybe falling under false flags of the destruction of oil tankers, the sinking of oil tankers, bombing an oil facility, accidents at oil facility that result in taking them offline, et cetera, as an excuse to raise the prices of oil. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about is some false flags that were stopped from creating oil disasters for that to happen. We could even this whole thing with destroying oil tankers or attacking oil refineries in order to hike up gas prices, or even to instigate war, could fall under the false flag banner. So let's go to the start off with the origination of the term false flag. I'm You guys in chat could hear me, right? Ordering false flag pizzas? No, okay. All right. So we go to the history of the false flag, the origin of them. False flag, which used to be called a black flag, used by pirates sometimes, is operations that are covert operations designed to deceive in such a way that the operations appear as though they are being carried out by other entities. The name is derived from the military concept of flying false colors, that is, flying a flag of a country other than one's own. False flag operations are not limited to war and counterinsurgency operations and can be used during peacetime. So this kind of falls under, remember maybe you've heard how like pirates would approach a ship flying the flag of say they're approaching a British ship and they're flying the flag of a British ship, or maybe they've hijacked a British ship, and then as they get closer to the British ship or merchant ship or whatever, up hoist the Jolly Roger, which comes from the Knights Templar actually, but up hoist the Jolly Roger, and the pirates converge on the other ship and take them over. A note on the Jolly Roger: the Jolly Roger does actually come from the Knights Templar. The Knights Templars at one point were decided to be executed by, I believe it was the kings of France and Spain. I'm not certain on that, but their benefactors had turned against them. This is where we get the current Knights Templars and the supposed money stash that they own. When these Knights Templars ordered to die, they turned against these kings and started hijacking ships of their gold and spices and just whatever these ships were carrying that was valuable, and they started stashing the stuff away. Allegedly had been stashing it for hundreds of years, and almost similar to the Comte de Saint Germain's alleged fund. Supposedly the United Templars currently today have $900 trillion worth of valuables, gold, jewels, funds, whatever, to be used to help set the world straight. And who's their spokesperson? But none other than Jon Stewart of the Today Show, who is a Knights Templar, and his brother is Big Mucky Muck on Wall Street, also a Knights Templar. I've gotten away from the false flag thing. I was just talking about the Jolly Roger there. Anyway, the Jolly Roger was originally used by the Knights Templars before pirates were using them. And then the Knights Templars, as they were doing this, were called pirates, and so that's how that term floated down to be associated with the Jolly Roger. Anyway, and that's where the sort of idea of the false flag comes from. Now, in naval warfare, the false flag is a practice considered acceptable in naval warfare, provided that the false flag was lowered and the national flag raised before engaging battle. Artillery cruisers operated in such a fashion in both world wars, as did Q ships, while merchant vessels were encouraged to use false flags for protection. The 1914 Battle of Trinidad was between the auxiliary cruisers RMS Caramagna and the SMS Captain Trafalgar, which had previously disguised themselves as one another. One of the most notable examples was in World War II, when the German commerce raider Koroman, disguised as a Dutch merchant ship, surprised and sank the Australian light cruiser HMAS Sydney in 1941, causing the greatest recorded loss of life on the Australian warship. The Comoran was also fatally crippled in that the encounter and its crew was captured, and it was a considerable psychological victory for the German fleet. The British used the Kriegsmarine Ensign in the St. Nazarene raid and captured a German code book. The old destroyer Campbelltown, which the British planned to sacrifice in the operation, was provided with cosmetic modifications, cutting the ship's funnels and chamfering the edges to resemble a German Mo-class destroyer. The British were able to get within 3 miles of the harbor before the defenses responded, where the explosive-rigged Campbelltown and commandos successfully disabled or destroyed the key dock structures of the port. And they did this by capturing a code book. And I guess as the ship, looking like a German ship, came into port all filled with bombs, they sent out a code saying that they were a German ship. So that would be considered a false flag, but not necessarily hoisting the flag. In air warfare, the December 1922, February 1923 rules concerning the control of wireless telegraphy in time of war and air warfare, drafted by the Commission of Jurists at The Hague, regulates 2 things. In Article 3, a military aircraft must carry an exterior mark indicating its nationality and its military character. Article 19, the use of false exterior marks is forbidden. Yeah, like anyone really pays attention to that anymore. But this says this draft was never adopted as a legally binding treaty, but the ICRC states that in its introduction on the draft to a great extent, the draft rules corresponded to the customary rules and general principles underlying the treaties of law and of the treaties on the law of war on land and sea. As such, these 2 non-controversial articles were already part of the customary law. What is that really saying? I don't know. It's saying that the rules of air warfare and the use of false flagging is similar to land and sea. Okay, land warfare for false flags. In land warfare, the use of the false flag is similar to that of naval warfare. The most widespread assumption is that this practice was first established under international humanitarian law at the trial in 1947 of the planner and commander of Operation Gaif, Otto Skorensky, by military court at the Dachau trials. In this trial, the court did not find Skorensky guilty of a crime by ordering his men into action in American uniforms. He had passed on to his men the warning of German legal experts, and if they fought in American uniforms, they would be breaking the laws of war, but they probably were not doing so just by wearing the uniform. During the trial, a number of arguments were advanced to substantiate this position, and the German and U.S. military seem to have been in agreement on it. In a transcript of the trial, it is mentioned that paragraph 43 of the field manual published by the War Department, U.S. Army, on October 1st, 1940, under the title Rules of Land Warfare, says national flags, insignias, and uniforms as a ruse. In practice, it has been authorized to make use of these as a ruse. The foregoing rule in the Fourth Hague Convention does not prohibit such use, but does prohibit their improper use. It is certainly forbidden to make use of them during a combat. Before opening fire upon the enemy, they must be discarded. So basically that says Another army could, say like the German army, could wear American uniforms to deceive the American army, but they must shed their uniforms before firing. Okay. So also the American Soldier's Handbook was quoted by defense counsel at The Hague. The use of the enemy flag insignia and uniform is permitted under some circumstances. They are not to be used during actual fighting, and if used in order to approach the enemy without drawing fire, should be thrown away or removed as soon as fighting begins. The outcome of the trial had been codified in the 1977 Protocol Additional to the Geneva Conventions of 12 August 49, Article 37, which prohibits pertify. 1. It is prohibited to kill, injure, or capture an adversary by resort of pertify. Acts of inviting the confidence of an adversary to lead him to believe that he is entitled to or is obliged to accord protection under the rules of international law applicable in armed conflict, with intent to betray that confidence, shall constitute pertify. The following acts are examples of perfidy: the feigning of an intent to negotiate under a flag of truce or of surrender, the feigning of incapacitation by wounds or sickness, the feigning of civilian non-combatant status, the feigning of protected status by the use of signs, emblems, or uniforms of the United Nations or of neutral or other states not parties to the conflict. Ruses of war are not prohibited. Such ruses are acts which are intended to mislead an adversary or induce him to an act recklessly by which infringe no rule or an international law applicable in armed conflict, and which are not perfidious because they do not invite the confidence of an adversary with respect to protection under that law. The following are examples of such ruses: the use of camouflage, decoys, mock operations, and disinformation. We're seeing that the United States has been already violating all these rules, wouldn't you say? Article 38 recognized the emblems. It is prohibited to make improper use of, this is all, let's see, false flags as a pretext for war. And we're just some incidents of various false flags over the last 100 years. The Mukden incident in 1931 involved Japanese officers fabricating a pretext for annexing Manchuria by blowing up a section of a railway. 6 years later, in 1937, they falsely claimed the kidnapping of one of their soldiers in the Marco Polo Brigade incident as an excuse to invade China. The Gelswit incident in 1939 involved Reinhard Heydrich fabricating evidence of a Polish attack against Germany to mobilize German public opinion of the war, to establish casus belli, and to justify the war with Poland. This, along with other false flag operations in Operation Himmler, would be used to mobilize support from the German population to start World War II in Europe. Now that was with the what was it called? The Reichsklag, something like that, burning, where Hitler and his party actually firebombed the Nazi Socialist Party offices and blamed it on Polish rebels. They did it themselves, of course, but they blamed it on the Poles to gain up the popular backing to invade Poland. And so we're seeing a pattern here. The Kassa attack in 1941 involved the city of Kassa, today Slovakia, which was then part of Hungary, being bombed by 3 unidentified planes of apparently Soviet origin. The attack became the pretext for the government of Hungary to declare war on the Soviet Union. The replacement of Iran's Anglo-Persian oil company with 5 American oil companies in the 1953 Iranian coup d'etat was the consequence of the U.S. and British orchestrated false flag operation called Operation Ajax. Operation Ajax used political intrigue, propaganda, and the agreements of the Kabashi tribal leaders to depose the democratically elected leader of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh. Information regarding the CIA-sponsored coup d'etat has been largely declassified and is available in the CIA archives. So what do we see here? That in 1953, the CIA, along with British MI6, worked and planned false flags to depose the democratic leader of Iran, to get American companies American and British oil companies into those facilities. So what do we have now? We're back in Iran, trying to get rid of a leader. To what? To get their oil. We're seeing this constant wheels within wheels game going on here. For instance, we have here the planned but never executed 1962 Operation Northwoods plot by the U.S. Department of Defense for a war with Cuba involves scenarios such as fabricating the hijacking or shooting down passenger and military planes, sinking a U.S. ship in the vicinity of Cuba, burning crops, sinking a boat filled with Cuban refugees, attacks by alleged Cuban infiltrators inside the United States, and harassment of U.S. aircraft and shipping, and the destruction of aerial drones by aircraft disguised as Cuban MiGs, Cuban MiGs. And those are, of course, fighter pilots they purchased from Russia. These actions would be blamed on Cuba and would be a pretext for an invasion of Cuba and the overthrow of Fidel Castro's communist government. It was authored by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but then rejected by President John F. Kennedy. The surprise discovery of the documents relating to Operation Northwoods was the result of the comprehensive search for records related to the assassination of President Kennedy by the Assassination Records Review Board in the mid-90s. Information about Operation Northwoods was later publicized by James Bamford. So this is a recent light. Of course, we know that that Kennedy basically had a lot of enemies with and without the government, and certainly one of them, his failure to start things up with Cuba, and here probably rejecting this false flag operation called Operation Northwoods, was certainly one of the things that the Joint Chiefs of Staff pretty much hated about Kennedy, along with the CIA, of course, because he wanted to break the CIA up after Eisenhower had warned him about the CIA and the military-industrial complex becoming too powerful and starting to run the government. Of course, we have all the other stuff about the Bay of Pigs, which the CIA was mad about too, because they lost a number of their people. So this is interesting. They had intended false flags, which brings to the question: any current false flags in the past 20 years, do they have to go through Obama, Bush, or Clinton first? And can he reject or I mean, technically, I guess he has to accept or reject being the commander in chief. But something tells me they may just go ahead and do stuff without even getting the approval of the commander-in-chief, if in fact it is even a military false flag, now that we know that there's secret government, secret militaries, black ops, and all that other good stuff. Then let's go next to what are called pseudo operations. A pseudo operations are those in which forces of one power disguise themselves as enemy forces. For example, a state power may disguise teams of operatives as insurgents, and with the aid of defectors, infiltrate insurgent areas. The aim of such pseudo operations may be to gather short or long-term intelligence, or to engage in active operations, in particular assassinations of important enemies. However, they usually involve both, as the risks of exposure rapidly increase with time and intelligence gathering, eventually leads to violent confrontation. Pseudo operations may be directed by military or police forces, or both. Police forces are usually best suited to intelligence tasks. However, military provides the structure needed to back up such pseudo ops with military response forces. According to U.S. military expert Lawrence Klein in 2005, the teams typically have been controlled by police services. This largely was due to the weaknesses in the respective military intelligence systems. And I think a good example of this would probably be Vietnam, as you know, a lot of intel has come out of I guess what we call pseudo operations of operatives from the CIA or from the Marines or Army who would infiltrate behind the lines to assassinate certain Viet Cong generals or high up muckety mucks. We've certainly got a lot of examples of that. Back to pseudo operations. The The State Political Directorate of the Soviet Union set up such an operation from 1921 to 26 called Operation Trust. They used loose networks of white army supporters and extended them, creating the pseudo-monarchist Union of Central Russia in order to help the OGPU identify real monarchists and anti-Bolsheviks. So basically what it says is that they created a phony sort of anti-Bolshevik group, which were really state police officials, in order to lure in and find out who the real anti-Bolsheviks were. What this sounds like is almost like the Occupy movement. I and certainly a lot of people believe that the Occupy movement was actually created by the Black Ops U.S. government, was created in order to lure in and identify specific people that they would determine to be, domestic terrorists or troublemakers or whatnot. Anyway, that's one theory going around that I happen to believe, and this is what it sounds like. It's being based on this Operation Trust that the Russians used in the 1920s to dig out the anti-Bolsheviks and monarchists. An example of a successful assassination was United States Marine Sergeant Herman H. Hannekin, leading a patrol of his Haitian gendarmerie disguised as enemy guerrillas in 1919. The patrol successfully passed several enemy checkpoints in order to assassinate the guerrilla leader Charlemagne Perret near Grand Rive du Nord. Hannekin was awarded the Medal of Honor and was commissioned a lieutenant for his deed. During the Mau Mau uprising of the 1950s, the Mau Mau uprising was actually part of what Barack Hussein Obama Sr. was a part of, which was the rebels fighting against the rule of the Kenyan rule of England. During the Mau Mau uprisings of the 50s, captured Mau Mau members who switched sides and specifically trained British troops initiated the pseudo gang concept to successfully counter Mau Mau. In 1960, Frank Kiston, who was later involved in the North Irish conflict and is now a retired British general, published a book called Gangs and Counter-Gangs, an account of his experiences with the technique in Kenya. Information included how to counter gangs and measures of deception, including the use of defectors, which brought the issue to a wider audience. Now, we've seen that in Afghanistan. Very similar stories when we went into Afghanistan of using defectors, defectors either from the Taliban or tribal defectors or whatever, in order to train our soldiers on the tactical terrain of Afghanistan. Certainly a difficult terrain to operate in. Another example of combined police and military oversight of pseudo operations includes the Cellist Scouts in former country Rhodesia, currently Zimbabwe, governed by white minority rule until 1980. The Cellist Scouts were formed at the beginning of Operation Hurricane in November of 73 by Major Ronald Reed Daly. As all special forces in Rhodesia, by 1977 they were controlled by ComOps, Commander of Combined Operations, Commander Lieutenant Peter Walls. The Cellist Scouts were originally composed of 120 members, with all officers being white and the highest rank initially available for Africans being Color Sergeant. They succeeded in turning approximately 800 insurgents who were then paid by Special Branch, ultimately reaching the number of 1,500 members. Engaging mainly in long-range reconnaissance and surveillance missions, they increasingly turned to offensive actions, including the attempted assassination of Zipra leader Joshua Nkomo of Zambia. The mission was finally aborted by the Cello Scouts and attempted again unsuccessfully by Rhodesian Special Air Service. Some offensive operations attracted international condemnation. In particular, the Cello Scouts raid on a ZANLA, which is Zimbabwe African National Liberation Army camp in Mozambique in August of 1976. ZANLA was then led by Joseph Tongora, using Rhodesian trucks and armored cars disguised as Mozambique military vehicles. 84 scouts killed 1,284 people in the camp, and the camp was registered as a refugee camp by the United Nations. Even according to Reed Daly, most of those killed were unarmed guerrillas standing in formation. The camp hospital was also set ablaze by the rounds fired by the scouts, killing all patients. According to David Martin and Phyllis Johnson, who did a study and visited the camp shortly before the raid, it was only a refugee camp and did not host guerrillas. The whole thing was staged for UN approval. Okay, so what I'm saying is that it was a guerrilla camp, but when the UN people came there to look at it, they made it look like a refugee camp. Dreaming with your host, Michael Hemmingson, here straight from Tijuana, where the piñatas fight back. You know, I hit them with a baseball bat. They grabbed the baseball bat and hit me. And they did not knock my internet down. It seems the internet crashed somewhere else. However, I do expect my internet probably to go down in the second hour. It seems to usually do that when I'm broadcasting from Tijuana. And but I'll usually jump back on in a minute or two. And you know, my esteemed producer, Matt Painter, will jump on and fill in for me as I find my way back to the online world from a third world country. I'd like to remind that Revolution Radio here at freedomslips.com is 100% user supported, user friendly, but also user supported. And we do rely on your donations to help us keep on keeping on. And so if you go to our landing page as you go to listen to the Freedom Slips at Revolution Radio, or no, it's Revolution Radio at Freedom Slips. Freedom's Lips, actually. Freedom's Lips. You'll see a site support button that you go to PayPal, and if you don't like PayPal, you'll see a snail mail address. You could send in cash, check, money orders, gold, silver, and diamond, and all that good stuff. You could buy banners, banner ads. You could support us, or actually not support. What is it? Support. What is the word? What's the word I'm looking for? Sponsor. That's it. You can sponsor a particular show like mine, or like a Matt Painter, or Sean David Morton, or Kerry Cassidy, or Hijacker, or whatever. You could support a particular show. There's all kinds of things you could do to help us out. Go to the swag store, buy a coffee mug or something like that. We got the nifty, wonderful, EMP-proof USB drive that is housed inside a bullet casing. Very necessary for the prepper waiting for the giant EMP wave. Actually, you know, we don't have this on our site. I think we should. I saw actually what is called a life straw. It's a straw with a filter in it. So if you're out there, you know, in the post-apocalyptic world, or, you know, you're trying to escape a FEMA camp or whatever, you know, this straw, you can go to any dirty water or whatever, and supposedly it filters the water out. I don't know about that, but it certainly looks interesting. I want to look into it some more because that's one thing I need for my bug out bag. What else did I want to mention? Oh, a little self promo here. I put out a now I can't find it. I put out an early version of a book called The Chronotope, only in ebook format right now, and only at Smashwords, although I think it might be up on Kobo. The paperback's coming out in late October, I believe. This book is long overdue. It'll come out back to back with a short science fiction novel. But this is a collection that has 12 or 13 short stories, science fiction short stories in it. The paperback will have 2 extra stories. This is just sort of a test run. People have been asking me about it, and I just putting it out there for the heck of it. If you're interested, if you're into ebooks, you have ebook readers. Smashwords has available all formats of ebook readers, and it's called The Chronotope and Other Speculative Fictions by your one and only host and my one and only science fiction collection. Even though I'm trying to write some more of this, but, you know, these stories span over for a while. I think the earliest one I wrote in 97 or 98, and all the way up to now, which I have read on the Wharf Poe Hour. A lot of stories about time travel. So we're back to the thing of false flags. Dude Guy in the chat said, mention Operation Gladio. I looked it up here. Operation Gladio, or in Italian, Operazione Gladio, was the code name for a clandestine NATO stay-behind operation in Italy after World War II. Its purpose was to continue anti-communist actions in the event of a Soviet invasion and conquest. Although Gladio specifically refers to the Italian branch of the NATO stay-behind organizations, Operation Gladio is used as an informal name for all stay-behind organizations, sometimes called Super NATO. The name Gladio is the Italian form of gladius, a type of Roman short sword. Well, I guess that's where gladiator comes from, obviously. Operating in many NATO and even some neutral countries, Gladio was part of a series of national operations first coordinated by the Clandestine Committee of the Western Union, founded in 1948. After the creation of NATO in 1949, the CCWU was integrated into Clandestine Planning Committee, or CPC, founded in 1951 and overseen by Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, also known as SHAPE, transferred to Belgium after France's official withdrawal from NATO's military committee in 1966, which was not followed by the dissolution of the French stay-behind paramilitary movements. The role of the CIA in sponsoring Gladio and the extent of its activities during the Cold War era and its relationship to right-wing terrorist attacks perpetuated in Italy during the years of Lead and other similar clandestine operations is the subject of ongoing debate and investigation. Italy, Switzerland, and Belgium have had parliamentary inquiries in the matter. What this which is actually what I'm going to get to later on, were of course a number of supposed terrorist attacks in Italy, France, and probably Greece, I believe, that were perpetuated by the CIA and these other agencies to blame on communists and Russia to basically make people suspicion of communism, not want to have communism in their countries, and so on and so forth. So that would fall under the false flag pseudo operations. Other types of false flags. Let me see. Let me get back up here. Espionage false flags. In espionage, the term false flag describes the recruiting of agents by operating. Oh no, we already went through that. Elections, false flag election stuff. In 2008, there was a shooting against two minibuses driving alongside the volatile area on the border between Abkhazia and the Republic of Georgia. The buses were carrying Georgians who lived in Abkhazia who wanted to cross the border so they could go and vote in the parliamentary election that day. The country had been experiencing internal political turmoil for the last year, and in an attempt to calm down the situation, President Mikhail Saakashvili moved forward both presidential and parliamentary elections. However, the presidential election in January that year was strongly contested, with hundreds of thousands attending protest rallies. When the parliamentary election came up in May, the mood was still tense. On a midday of May 21st, the two minibuses came under attack with small arms and grenades. And though there were no casualties, 3 people were taken to a hospital where President Saakashvili later arrived and was filmed by TV at the patient's bedside. So it was all propaganda. In his comments on TV, which dominated the news during the election day, Saakashvili indicated that the attack had been an attempt to disrupt the election, implying that it had been Akbars or Russian forces who had been behind it. This provided a favorable opportunity for the president to focus the nation's attention on an external enemy, thereby leading attention away from his domestic critics, as well as making use of his position as leader to rally the Georgians around the candidates in the election. However, United Nations investigation later found, based on empty cartridges and the position of traces left by grenade launchers on the ground, that the attack had originated from a patch of land under control of Georgians and with weapons used by Georgian forces, indicating that the attack had been staged. A Georgian investigative TV documentary later found that camera crew from the government-friendly channel Rustavi 2 had been in position with their equipment before the shooting took place. Okay, there's a lot of people talking right now about the false flag assassination of Obama, that Obama has a plan to have an attempted assassination on him, which of course he'll live, or he'll get out unscathed. And this, who will they blame it on? The Iranians, the militias, or whatever. Use it as a way to make him look heroic, to gain sympathy. And this would probably happen before the election. A lot of people are saying this probably happened in October. I guess we'll see if that will happen. But this certainly is not unheard of. We also have business false flags. In business and marketing, similar operations are being employed in some public relations campaigns. Telemarketing firms practice false flag type behavior when they pretend to be a market research firm, referred to as sugging. In some rare cases, members of an unsuccessful business will destroy some of their own property to conceal an unrelated crime, such as safety violations, embezzlement, and so forth, but make it appear as though the destruction was done by a rival company. False flags in political campaigning. Political campaigning has a long history of this tactic in various forms, including in person, print media, and electronically in recent years. This can involve when supporters of one candidate pose as supporters of another, or act as straw men for their preferred candidate to debate against. This can happen with or without the candidate's knowledge. The Canuck letter is an example of one candidate creating a false document and attributing it as coming from another candidate in order to discredit that candidate. In 2006, individuals practicing false flag behavior were discovered and outed in New Hampshire and New Jersey after blog comments claiming to be from supporters of a political candidate were traced to the IP address of the paid staffers for that candidate's opponent. On February 19, 2011, Indiana Deputy Prosecutor Carlos Lamb sent a private email to Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker suggesting that he run a false flag operation to counter the protests against Walker's proposed restrictions on public employees' collective bargaining rights. Quote unquote, if you could employ an associate who pretends to be sympathetic to the union's cause to physically attack you or even use a firearm against you, you could discredit the unions, read the email. It went on to say that the effort would, quote, assist in undercutting any support that the media may be creating in favor of the unions. The press had acquired a court order to access all of Walker's emails, and Lamb's email was exposed. At first, Lamb vehemently denied it, but eventually admitted it and resigned. Ideological false flags. Political or religious ideologies will sometimes use false flag tactics. This can be done to discredit or implicate rival groups, create an appearance of enemies where none exist, or create the illusion of organized and directed opposition when, in truth, the ideology is simply unpopular with society. In retaliation for writing The Scandal of Scientology, the Church of Scientology stole stationery from author Paulette Cooper's home and then used that stationery to forge bomb threats and had them mailed to a Scientology office. The Guardian's office also had a plan for further operations to discredit Cooper, known as Operation Freakout. But several Scientologist operatives were arrested in a separate investigation, and the plan failed. We do know that Scientologists, the Church of Scientology, vehemently, oppressively, and obsessively go after anyone who criticizes them, either through lawsuits or by, as we see here, creating false flag incidents to discredit the person. False flag use of terrorism. False flag tactics are also employed during the Algerian Civil War, starting in the mid-1994. Death squads composed of Department de Ressourcement de la Sécurité security forces disguised themselves as Islamist terrorists and committed false flag terror attacks. Such groups included the Organization of Young Free Algerians and the Secret Organization for the Safeguard of the Algerian Republic. According to Roger Failgott and Pascal Kropp in 1999, the Organization of Young Free Algerians was reminiscent of the Organization of French Algerian Resistance, ORAF, a group of counter-terrorists created in December of 1956 by the CIA's, or the French CIA, which is the Direction de Surveillance des Territoires, du Territoire. My French is really bad right now, otherwise known as the DST, whose mission was to carry out terrorist attacks with the aim of quashing any hopes of political compromise. The Russian apartment bombings in the Russian cities of Blisnaks, Moscow, and Vladivostok in September of 1999, which killed nearly 300 people, was described by Yuri Felinsky, Alexander Litnikov, David Satter, Boris Kalinsky, Vladimir Pozovitz, blah, 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 filmmaker. Anyway, it was described by all these people to have been done by the Domestic Security Agency of the Russian Federation. Again, a false flag. On the night of February 27th of 1933, the Reichstag building was set on fire. And I was talking about this earlier. At the urging of Hitler, Hindenburg responded the next day by issuing an emergency decree for the protection of the people and the state, which stated restrictions on personal liberty, on the right of free expression of opinion, including freedom of the press, on the rights of assembly and association, and violations of the privacy of postal, telegraphic, and telephonic communications, and warrants for house searches, orders for confiscations, as well as restrictions on property are also permissible beyond the legal limits otherwise prescribed, suspending key provisions of the German Weimar Constitution. The question of who actually started the Reichstag fire is still as often considered unknown and occasionally debated, while Dutch communist Marinus van Leeuwen was convinced that was convicted of the crime and executed. His conviction is not considered credible. So what we had here, it's fairly believed by most historians and conspiracy theorists and whatever that Hitler's Socialist Party started the fire to one, use an excuse to go into Poland, and here also seems number two, to suspend the Weimar Constitution, which gave people in Germany certain rights, although these rights were pulled afterwards, which would include freedom of the press, the rights of assembly, the rights of privacy of their telephones and telegraphs and mail and stuff like that. And also it looks like they convicted a Dutch communist who didn't do it. Are we seeing similar stuff now? Possibly. We need to look at, say, 9/11. Many say that the terrorists that the Al-Qaeda guys from Saudi Arabia and all that weren't on those planes. They were just used falsely, maybe killed, used them as scapegoats. We may or may not be seeing that in the Aurora situation. Is James Holmes a patsy like Lee Harvey Oswald was? And then we're seeing a history of all that stuff. False flags under dirty war. What is dirty war here? During a 1981 interview, whose contents were revealed by documents declassified by the CIA in 2000, former CIA agent Michael Townley explained that Ignacio Novo Sample, members of CORU, an anti-Castro organization, had agreed to commit the Cuban national movement in the kidnapping in Buenos Aires of a president of a Dutch bank. The abduction, organized by civilian SIDE agents, the Argentine intelligence agency, was to obtain a ransom. Townley said that Novo Sample had provided $6,000 from the Cuban nationalist movement forwarded to the civilian SID agents to pay for the preparation expenses of the kidnapping. After returning to the U.S., Novo Sample sent Townley a stock of paper used to print pamphlets in the name of Grupo Rojo, an imaginary Argentine Marxist terrorist organization, which was to claim credit for the kidnapping of the Dutch banker. Townley declared that the pamphlets were distributed in Mendoza and Corboda in relation with false flag bombings perpetuated by these side agents, which had at their aim to accredit the existence of a fake Grupo Rojo. However, these SID agents procrastinated too much, and the kidnapping ultimately was not carried out. So I guess they were going to blame the kidnapping of this Dutch banker on this Grupo Rojo out of Argentina and connected to Cuba. I suppose to let's see, this was in the 50s or 60s. No, this was in the 60s. I guess supposed to as another excuse to invade and attack Cuba. Certainly seems like there were a lot of plans to invade and attack Cuba. We do know that the CIA had a number of plans to assassinate Fidel Castro, and if I remember my Black Ops history correctly, they even had a couple attempts that didn't pan out. Which certainly conforms to the idea of numerous timelines and other things. One of the early false flags that many people believe was initiated by the U.S. government was the blowing up and the sinking of the USS Maine in Cuba as an excuse to get into the Spanish-American War. In the late 1800s, in the late 1800s. The USS Maine was the United States Navy's second commissioned battleship and the first U.S. Navy ship to be named after the state of Maine. Originally classified as an armored cruiser, she was built in response to the Brazilian battleship Chulo and the increase in naval forces in Latin America. The other one was the Texas, but let me see. So the Maine went down. See, the Maine is best known for her catastrophic loss in the Havana harbor on the evening of February 15th of 1898. She was sent to protect U.S. interests during the Cuban revolt against Spain. She exploded suddenly without warning and sank quickly, killing nearly 3/4 of her crew. The cause and responsibility for her sinking remained unclear after a board of inquiry. Nevertheless, popular opinion in the United States was fanned by inflammatory articles printed in the quote-unquote yellow press by William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer to blame Spain. The phrase, "Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain," became the rallying cry for action, which came within the Spanish-American War later that year. While the sinking of the Maine was not a direct cause of action, it served as a catalyst, accelerating the approach to a diplomatic impasse between the U.S. and Spain. The cause of the Maine sinking remains the subject of speculation. Suggestions have included an undetected fire in one of her coal bunkers, a naval mine on her, and her deliberate sinking to drive the U.S. into a war with Spain. In fact, there's been a number of inquiries, even up to about the 1990s, investigating whether the truth about it. Was it? They say there was some burning coal next to some munitions that set off the explosive, or it was a landmine put in the harbor. False flag is the theme of today's Art of Dreaming, with your host Michael Hemmingson, the guy who never loses a sock. Not even here in Tijuana. I am broadcasting from Tijuana, where there's currently a bit of political uproar over the recent presidential election about a month ago of Nieto Peña. He's with the PRI party, which is a party that had been in power for 70 years in Mexico, was voted out office about 12 years ago, and is now back in power. Many believe that this election was rigged. There's been massive protests in Mexico City for the last few weeks, to the extent of millions of people. There's been a media blackout. Of course, the Mexican government doesn't want the world to know that the protests are this massive. I haven't been seeing that in Tijuana much. Maybe a few small protests at the government Palacio. Other than that, I just know what's going on down south. So Mexico certainly has had its long history of false flags, of assassinations blamed on other people, other parties, and so on. Someone put in the chat Operation Night of the Long Knives, which was about political assassinations within that Hitler pulled out. The Night of the Long Knives, sometimes called Operation Hummingbird in Germany, was a purge that took place between June 30 and July 2nd of 1934, when the Nazi regime carried out a series of political murders. Leading figures of the left-wing Strassenset faction of the Nazi Party, along with its namesake Gregor Strasser, were murdered, as were prominent conservative anti-Nazis, such as former Chancellor Kurt von Schleicher and Gustav Ritter von Stromberling, or whatever. I just lost my place. Many of those killed were leaders in the Stromberling and were known as the Brown Shirts. Adolf Hitler moved against the SA, the Brown Shirts, and its leader Ernst Röhm, because Hitler saw the independence of the SA and the penchant of its members for street violence as a direct threat to his newly gained political power. He also wanted to conciliate leaders of the Reichswehr, the official German military, who feared and despised the SA. In particular, Röhm's ambition to absorb the Reichswehr into the SA under Röhm's leadership. Additionally, Hitler was uncomfortable with Röhm's outspoken support for a second revolution to redistribute wealth. In Röhm's view, Hitler's election had accomplished the nationalistic revolution. Okay, where have we heard redistribution of wealth before? 2008, Obama's election. Hitler didn't really like Röhm's idea of the redistribution of wealth. Hitler used the purge to attack or eliminate critics of his new regime, especially those loyal to Vice Chancellor Franz von Papen, as well as to settle scores with old enemies. At least 85 people died during the purge, although the final death toll may have been in the hundreds, and more than 1,000 perceived opponents were arrested. Most of the killings were carried out by the SS and the Gestapo, the regime's secret police. The purge strengthened and consolidated the support of the Reichswehr for Hitler. It also provided a legal grounding for the Nazi regime, as the German courts and cabinet quickly swept aside centuries of legal prohibition against extrajudicial killings to demonstrate their loyalty to the regime. Well, of course, otherwise they'd been killed themselves if these judges didn't. Before its execution, its planners sometimes referred to it as Hummingbird, the code word used to send the execution squads into action on the day of the purge. The code name for the operation appears to have been chosen arbitrarily. The phrase Night of the Long Knives in the German language predates the massacre itself and refers generally to acts of vengeance. Germans still use the term Raubfust to describe the murders, the term given to it by the Nazi regime, despite its unproven implication that the murders were necessary to prevent a coup. Does this fall under false flag? I guess, in certain ways it does, especially if the murders were, say, blamed on other people. Now, we've seen this happen also anywhere going back to the Roman Empire, when the Caesars would certain Caesars would rise to power by killing off the senatorial enemies. Did we not see Julius Caesar betrayed by his own senators and murdered in the palace halls in order to raise someone else up as Caesar? We saw it in Iraq when Saddam Hussein and his Ba'ath Party came into power. In fact, the very night his Ba'ath Party came into power, his men actually rounded up all the opposition party members and people who did not support Saddam Hussein and killed them out in the back street. And Saddam Hussein seem to have taken the playbook from Hitler on quickly eliminating your critics, your enemies, and people you had an old score to settle with. And as we see here, that the German courts, the judges had just pushed away all their former laws about such things in order to look hand in hand, to look favorably with the ruling party, because these guys would just get killed themselves. Are we seeing this right now with the Supreme Court, perhaps allowing Obamacare to go through, with certain aspects in courtrooms with terrorists or so-and-so defined terrorists being sent off to Guantanamo Bay by courts and their rights completely stripped? We're not just talking about U.S. rights, but human rights. And I guess the question now is, okay, so we had the USS Maine. We talked about the USS Maine. The other one is the USS Liberty, which many believed was sunk by the Israeli Mossad to get the United States behind, if not involved, with the Six-Day War. There's now, remember, the Liberty stuff going on. The anniversary was just, I don't know, about 6 weeks ago or something like that. So that brings us up now to current false flags. There's a guy, Captain Eric H. May, former Marine intel guy who heads up a group called Ghost Troop. He's the commander of Ghost Troop, and the Ghost Troop apparently is an organization of former intel guys and officers and stuff like that who investigate, who keep an eye on things, and they claim to have stopped a number of false flags since 9/11. They formed together to stop the next 9/11, and they've claimed that they have stopped quite a few false flag events, from the destruction of oil tankers to an atomic bomb in Chicago, an atomic bomb in Portland. Whether they have or not, I can't say at the moment, but this is what they're claiming. They've claimed to, since 2004, to have stopped 15 false flags, either by releasing documents and information in the news service to actually physically going out there and stopping these false flags. On Veterans Today, Captain Eric May of Ghost Troop has listed the 10 most endangered false flag targets currently in the world. I'm going to post this in the chat room and talk about some of the other some of these false flag stops, things that they've stopped in Chicago is pretty interesting, that apparently Rob Blagojevich was also involved with in the planning. Anyway, so on his top 10 list, the first one is Chicago. And these are the top 10 possible false flag targets currently. Chicago is mobilizing and militarizing in preparation for the NATO summit. Oh, well, this is a past article. Of course, everyone was saying when the NATO summit was there, oh, is it going to be a false flag? I mean, this is why I wanted to talk about the false flag today, because every time I turn on the radio, if it's Revolution Radio, American Freedom Radio, or whatever, and look on the alternative media blogs, all I hear is, oh, it's going to be a false flag. The Olympics, a false flag. Chicago, a false flag. Whatever, a false flag everywhere. They think this false flag is going to happen, and yet they haven't happened. And my theory I'm going on right now is that the black ops, or whatever you want to call them, are purposely putting out these false flag rumors for everyone to start freaking out about and look the other way. In terms of like the Aurora shooting thing, I'm running on the theory that, you know, with all the strangeness of it and the things that don't click, they've intentionally done that. They don't care if everyone knows it's a black ops or a false flag or whatever, and then they start tossing out more weird information, more theories, more conspiracies, just to confuse everyone. That's my theory anyway. So Chicago is still on his top list. The next one is London, of course, the Olympics. The next one is Houston. Number 3 is Houston. It's the center of many petrochemical explosions that have occurred during terrorist exercises, driving up prices and resulting in record profits for big oil. Dirtiest and deadliest of all is Texas City, a British petroleum town in Ron Paul's congressional district, which is called Toxic City by its savvy locals. Number 4, Mumbai. Mumbai wouldn't be a surprising terrorist target, considering that its commuter trains were hit by multiple blasts on July 11th of 2006, the day before Israeli invaded Lebanon. It was a sequel to the 7/7 London bus bombings of 2005, which was a sequel to the March 11 Madrid train bombings in 2004. On the same July 11th, hours after the attack on Mumbai, there was a terrifying train incident in Chicago. And I remember that. Commuters there were thought that they were under attack, and I suspect that they were. Meanwhile, in Houston, the Bush family and its retainers were conveniently gathered in Houston for Ken Lay's funeral. It was a scene taken from The Godfather, and when my Bush administrator chum, Ambassador Chase Udemeyer, arrived in the Bayou City and invited me to dinner, I declined. Well, I'm speaking here from Captain May. That's not me. I'm quoting from his article. The commuter train blew up in Chicago. Now, my theory on that, as I put my tinfoil hat on, was that it was an assassination. There was someone on that train that they wanted to kill. But instead of actually assassinating that person, they just took the whole train out. This has been done before, maybe not in this country, but when a plane goes down or another train is attacked, the actual target is a passenger. And they just sacrifice the other people. This way it looks like an accident, it looks like a terrorist attack. It doesn't look like the actual assassination of that person. Who could it be? Could be a banker, could be someone who's got information, could be an investigative reporter, who knows. Number 5 on Captain May's list is Portland. Portland has been neither forgotten nor forgiven for embarrassing Poppy Bush with rowdy protests. Afterward, unaffectionately dubbed Little Beirut, it compounded its sins in 2005 by becoming the only U.S. city to withdraw from the Joint Terrorism Task Force. It was mapped out as ground zero for our 10-kiloton nuke in the Harvard research study, released on April 19th of 2007, called The Day After, Action in the 24 Hours Following a Nuclear Blast in an American City. 3 months later, nuclear terror exercise Noble Resolve was playing the scenario out. And 2 months after the national level exercise of 2007, with its Portland dirty bomb script, almost ended with a bang as Homeland Security Director Michael Chernoff arrived. Okay, what they're basically saying is that they would target Portland as retaliation for one, embarrassing Poppy Bush when they had all those riots and stuff for the G4, and for backing out on a terrorist task force, what you call a fake scenario, a drill. Interesting that he would, that would they choose Portland for that reason, just as a retaliation? Sure. I mean, Portland is one of those sort of liberal, laid-back cities that the cabal certainly does not like. Okay, number 6 on Captain May's list is Paris. Paris would be a fine target for luring France into more North African interventions a la Libya. France's North African aspirations go back all the way to Napoleon Bonaparte's late 18th century campaign. Who knows, with a bloody strike on the Eiffel Tower or the Louvre, France might be willing to partner up with the Anglo-Judeo Axis to bomb Iran. Okay, remember when what's his face? The Arizona senator. Now I can't even think of his name. Damn it! Why? John McCain. When 2007, when he was campaigning, he used that Barbara Ann song from the the surf. Just my brain's not working today. He was going bomb, 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 Iran, bomb, 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 Iran. Anyway, okay. Number 7 on Captain May's list is the USS Enterprise, not Captain Kirk's ship, but the old battle aircraft carrier. Of course, this has been talked about and speculated about for the past year, that the USS Enterprise would be sacrificed and destroyed over there in the Gulf of Hormuz or the Persian Gulf. Blame it on Iran. And that actually destroying it over there would actually be, in the long run, cheaper than decommissioning it and then stripping it. So what if a lot of people also are going on the aspect that some sort of white hats within the intel community and the military had put out the information about this proposed false flag attack on the U.S. Enterprise in order to stop it. That by putting it out there in the news media as a rumor, that would deter it from actually happening, because they were upset that a lot of thousands, we're talking 3, 4, 5,000 naval personnel, sailors, infantry, or Marines, and officers and stuff like that would be killed in such an operation. So until the Enterprise returns to Coronado Naval Base, I believe that's where it's going, or maybe it's going to Norfolk, to be decommissioned. It's still out there. It's still fine. And we hope that its crew comes back unharmed and unalive, and not the sacrificial lambs of an evil plan to start World War III. Number 8 on Captain May's list is San Antonio. It's the most recent entry into the false flag file, with a warning sign showing up in May of 2011. Bexar County Sheriff to train with Israeli Army. Apparently, they sent Israeli troops to San Antonio to, I guess, train the sheriffs out there. I've been hearing about this, that Israeli troops are now training sheriff deputies and rookie officers, and that since the Israeli military doesn't adhere or see to United States civil rights, either federal or statewide, that they're actually training these new deputies and police officers to just ignore certain things like probable cause. If a person says, I don't agree to a search of my person, we'll just be met with a punch in the gut and tossed down on the ground with handcuffs. Interesting. Why would San Antonio? I don't know. I guess it's a retaliation, or make it look like a retaliation. You could say the attack was by the Freeman movement, or a militia, or sovereign citizens. I mean, sovereign citizens, just to be a sovereign citizen is all of a sudden you're a domestic terrorist. Now the sovereign citizens are even afraid to admit it. If you claim sovereign citizenship on your IRS, it means an immediate harassment and being tossed in the federal pen. Number 9 is Las Vegas. Las Vegas may get lucky and avoid a false flag fix, but don't bet on it. Like Portland, it has behaved contrarily at crunch time. First, in 2009, Nevada senators object to FEMA training planned inside Las Vegas. Then in 2010, when a terrorist track drill in Vegas was canceled, Nevada Senator Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader, has an outstanding debt to the powers that be in a town that's noted for collecting. Now let's say if Las Vegas were attacked false flagly, it would seem to me that a pretty big payout and insurance would go out. Say they attacked Donald Trump's building, so he'd collect on the insurance and that. Money could be moved. They could say this certain money and gold was destroyed, and it could be moved about. And of course, I don't think that Romney is going to allow that. Romney being a Mormon, and considering that the Mormons pretty much own half of Vegas now. Now, Vegas isn't owned by the mob, the Italian mob or whatever anymore, organized crime. They're all on Wall Street. Vegas is now owned either by the Mormons or the Japanese. So if Romney does become president, I think he'll probably save Vegas from that. More, it being Mormon land. Okay, and number 10 on the final list is Berlin. Berlin is the key to Central Europe and is consequently always a geostrategic consideration. With the Russians ever problematic and a potential strategic partner to Germany, NATO will go to any length to keep it in its western orbit, including terrorizing its primary city. After all, Operation Gladio, an extension of NATO terror program, was used to achieve that very aim during the Cold War. Add that all to the revenge motive expressed by Elie Wiesel. Yes, Elie Wiesel has expressed a Israeli need for revenge against Germany, possibly by attacking and destroying Berlin. Or it could be used false flagly, I suppose, in that situation. Now, Captain May lists a number of false flag attempts that he says his group, the Ghost Troop, have thwarted. A lot of them in Texas. Refinery explosions, BP pipeline explosions, refineries. He claims they stop the destruction of the Sears Tower in Chicago in 2006. An operation apparently that Blago, we'll just call him Blago, the former mayor of Chicago, or the former governor, I'm sorry, the former governor of Chicago apparently was behind. Apparently they had done a drill or planned a drill for what would happen if a tall tower was destroyed in Chicago, and they apparently were actually going to do that, according to Captain May, until this operation was outed. Refinery explosions. There are a lot of refinery and pipeline explosion possibilities, which one of my contacts, the guy I had on from Disclosure, the Disclosure Project, he's been sending me some information to look out for actual explodings and blow up of oil tankers and stuff like that as an excuse to beef up gas prices, to blame it on Iran. He says similar to the Cold War scenarios between Cuba and the U.S. Yeah, right. Every incident is a move on the grand chessboard, and both sides understand the meaning behind each move. He says, my job is to break the code and report the true intent behind each move and present it holistically. These incidents are not isolated events. This sounds like something more along Hijacker's itinerary or Hijacker's vein. Is to he's always talking about the fourth dimensional chessboard, which seems like my contact here is also referring to. That if we look at these things, that all these things are not isolated incidents, and we can include Aurora and Oak Creek, Wisconsin in that, and look at each event as a move on the chessboard to try to figure out the incomplete end game. It's something more in Hijacker's vein or someone else on Revolution Radio aside from me, because I'll just wallow in a bunch of conspiracy theories. But he's got a point. Let's look at let's see. He says Kansas City false flag attempt, tree bomber attempt in Portland. I don't know what that's about. Let's look at the Kansas City false flag event. This goes back to August of 2009. Alarmed by what they saw as the dangers of national weapons of mass destruction terror excuses, vibrant response, 4 leading 9/11 truth veterans decided to issue an alert, going by the dictum that every terror exercise has an optional plan to become an actual attack, they investigated and published the Vibrant Response script, which called for a simulated nuking of Kansas City. They added a list of the top 5 U.S. targets. Okay, so one was Kansas City. What's going on here is that they're believing that every time there's a drill or a fake possibility of something happening, it actually happens. And we're certainly seeing that sort of stuff going on. I mean, 9/11, they were doing a drill for a terrorist attack just as that. We're hearing that in Aurora, the cops were actually doing a drill about an actual shooting at a movie theater. So you see them doing the fake drill, and yet it really happens. So these guys are ready to move in and take care of the problem. It's very strange. I mean, it seems like so obvious. So let's look at, say, Aurora. Can we really call that a false flag? To what extent is it a false flag? I mean, does the Aurora situation, I mean, they haven't blamed it on Syria or Iran, or is it any way to instigate more military action over there in the Middle East? And they're still, at this point, just blaming it on the lone gunman. Many are just believing that this incident and the incident in Wisconsin have been operations, black operations, or maybe what I was reading about earlier called pseudo operations, as an attempt to rally people for gun control. I was reading about another such situation. We've seen them in Australia, and we've seen them in Mexico and in Russia, I believe that was in Georgia. In the Ukraine, where you had all these, violent incidents of terrorist attacks or lone gunmen and all that, to the point where the public pleads for help, save us, safety. We need safety from these crazy people and their guns. Take the guns away. And some of you guys out there, and even me leaning towards that, feel that that the U.S. government does want to ice the Second Amendment, wants to take our guns away, a significant amount of guns, so that we can't use them as protection against the very own government we're asking protection from. So yes, I guess you could say that the Aurora incident, if it falls under that purview, could be called a false flag. Same possibility with the Wisconsin incident, although they are saying again, there's something that just came up with the Wisconsin incident. Before we were hearing that the Page, Wade Michael Page, the white supremacist rock and roller former Army PSYOPs guy, was killed by a police officer by being shot in the stomach. But now news reports are coming out that after he got shot in the stomach, he shot himself in the head. Now this is what the FBI is saying. A lot of people aren't buying it. I'm not buying it either, which is already starting to make it suspicious. Now a lot of people are arguing about the whole, was it four gunmen, one gunman, what was going on? Our very own Sean David Morton believes it was 4 gunmen, and either they slipped out in the back, or they dressed up as sheiks or something. Who knows? So as more information comes out about the Oak Creek shootings, we'll certainly start making our assessments of conspiracies and false flags and this and that. So I'd like to hear if anyone out there has any, say, predictions about coming false flags. Certainly a lot of people are saying that some sort of false flag event is going to occur at the Olympics, either before it closes or at the closing ceremonies. Either an attack, bombings, an assassination, who knows? There are really strange things going on already at the Olympics. There's the 7 athletes from now I don't even remember where they're from. Anyways, 7 athletes have disappeared. And interesting enough that 7 of them disappeared. So the number 7 keeps popping up in this whole conspiracy stuff around the Olympics. The Aurora shootings happened 7 days before the Olympic Open. The attack in Wisconsin happened in 7 days before the Olympics are to close. We got the 7 injured or 7 killed in Oak Creek. 7 were injured the next day in Detroit in another shooting incident, which seems more like a family squabble, but still there's that number 7. Then we got the 7 athletes missing. It's something to look into. So anyway, so a lot of people are a lot of you out there, some of us out there, are waiting for the false flag to happen at the Olympics. And my question is, well, what happens when nothing happens at the Olympics? If nothing happens, what are people going to say? The false flag's diverted, thwarted. Did the white hats do it? Or are they just playing on our paranoia? The whole Alex Jones sort of fear porn thing, getting the best of us all. Are we reading too much into it, or is this stuff happening? That is the very thing I believe that these Black Ops guys are playing on, that they're sending out bogus information out there to frighten us, to get the tin hat guys yakking away on the blogs. And even though the alternative media community really, even if they figure it out that Aurora was a false flag, they figure this out. Really, the alternative media community is what? At best, 1 million, 2 million people, if that. A couple 100,000 will know the truth compared to the 300 million of the United States. That's nothing. So they don't really care if even if 1 million of us know the truth. If 1 million of us figure out what they're doing, the other 299 million people out there are just going to buy whatever story they hear on TV, or they read on CNN, or they hear at the water cooler. Iran was behind it, Al Qaeda was behind it. The Obama's birth certificate is just made up by the Republican Party to smear him, because they know that the majority of the population doesn't have the time and doesn't even really care. They'll watch the evening news. They'll watch the fabricated stuff on CNN and Fox News and MSNBC and whatever, and that's that. Then they go off and watch American Idol, or they watch the next episode of Breaking Bad or whatever, and don't pay too much of attention. And a lot of people are more worried about not losing their jobs or finding a job, feeding their family, paying off the mortgage, paying off the car, paying off MasterCard, all the indentured servitude that is their lives and the debt. They really don't have time to wonder and worry about, was Aurora a false flag? Is Obama planning a fake assassination to make him look good? And looking at all the details and listening to the police dispatches to try to figure out all of the little discrepancies and codes. So the majority of people don't care, don't know, and don't even really bother with it. So why would the powers that be, Black Ops, Cabal, whatever, worry about that if only a small percentage of the people, us in the alternative media, figure it out? Are we going to stop the next one? Is the millions and millions of people going to all of a sudden listen to people who are classified as crackpots and tinfoil hat wearers and conspiracy theorists? No. So they don't care if we figure it out. That's the theory I'm going on, at least. I'll give an example. Here in Mexico. Mexico is a UFO hotbed, especially down more south by Mexico City and in the areas where there's Aztec ruins. But here in Tijuana, too, there's UFOs all over the place. I see them. Other people see them. There's UFOs flying everywhere. Seriously. All you have to do is go down to Mexico, look up in the sky for a few hours, and you will see a UFO. However, most of the people in Mexico, well, one, they're used to it, but two, they don't really care. I actually saw a UFO and outside. This was about, I don't know, about 13 months ago, 14 months ago. It was not long after my daughter was born. There was a flotilla of these white lights, fluttering about Tijuana. And I was like, yeah, look, check that out, man. Isn't that crazy? And people were just like, yeah, we see it all the time. And the mother of my child, she said, look, yeah, there's UFOs, but most Mexicans are worried about feeding their family the next day, about money, about clothes, about whatever. They got too many personal worries to deal with than to occupy themselves with aliens and UFOs. So what if they fly around? As long as they don't bug the people on the ground, they don't care. That's an example in comparison to why the majority of Americans could care less about the truth being exposed. I mean, if they did, with all the stuff, all the evidence about 9/11, all those documentaries, all of the obviousness of it, that would be out on the forefront of the American consciousness, and we'd have 100 million people demanding the truth, converging on the White House, converging on Washington, and saying, "Tell us, we demand to know what really happened." But that's not happening. You're not going to get 100 million people demanding the truth. You might get 1 million, 2 million, but 1/3 of the country, 2/3 of the country, no, they don't care, or they already buy the official story, or it doesn't affect their lives, or it's it's the evil Al Qaeda and what's his face. Let's go get them. Let's shoot them up. Let's attack their countries and all that stuff. So with this, we got about 20 minutes. No one has called in to foist upon me their false flag predictions and their ideas of any false flags that I haven't covered. But you're certainly willing to do so. Give us a call or go on to Freedom Slips for Skype. Most of the people who call are already regulars, so you know how to get in. So let's hear it, or I'm just going to start chirping away about various things. I hope I haven't been boring you people. I just started thinking about this whole false flag thing a couple of days ago, and wanted to tackle it and to determine what is or is not a false flag. So basically, the false flag originates from ships that were carrying the wrong flag of who they weren't, in order to get closer to other ships, to attack them, either militarily or as pirates, for say a group of soldiers to hoist the white flag in truce or surrender. And we do got someone coming in here to talk about our little false flags. Hello, Dude Guy, are you with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I thought a Mad Painter had the control, but you know what? I may have taken this off. Hang on a second. Hey, Matt, are you still a producer?
Oops.
Well, I've been on the radio, right?
You've been on the radio. Yeah. Did it knock us off? Should I hang up?
No, hang on a second. Let me check. Because I shouldn't have been able to answer that call. A-Man had to call. Hang on. I just want to make sure. So we're not talking in thin air. Need to wait for the thing to come up.
Well, maybe I called the wrong. I think I called you by accident. I should have called.
Hang on. We're almost there. Okay, we're on the air. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. All right.
I guess I must have taken over the server when AMAD crashed. All right. So, Dude Guy, what's going on? What's
Hey, great show. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you wanted to take callers or not, so I was kind of waiting for the word, because I had your topic had prompted me to kind of go over my mind. I had done a lot of research in this area for a long time, and I'm not going to go on about the more esoteric ones. I think I mentioned Gladio in the chat room because I think that is an excellent example of our governments through the arm of NATO doing in Europe exactly what it looks like they're doing here now with these shootings and everything. And another version of that was
oh no, you're on.
Yeah, okay.
We figured it out. We just had
when I got booted and you picked it up, you took control.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay, so now I have the server. All right, okay.
Okay, everything's cool.
As you were saying?
Yeah. Another example, Gladio was in Europe, of course, but our government participated in all these terrorist things to inflame the public and paint certain political figures and parties in a bad light. It wasn't just the communists they were trying to kind of put in a bad light they would stage terrorist attacks on certain groups and churches and schools and stuff, and then they would pretend that they were communists or socialists and take credit for it as being that, when it wasn't really the communists or socialists doing it. It was the government. It was NATO, this NATO Special Forces group.
Well, this calls into question, I mean, are there any real terrorist attacks? Or are they all bogus, you know?
Well, not in the sense that we've been led to believe. The most terrorists are very amateurish, and their attacks just aren't successful. It's like a amateur bank robbery. I mean, you see those all the time where the guy goes to slip a note and the teller tells him, no, I'm not going to give you any money. And he's just kind of like, oops, what do I do now? You know, he doesn't really have the guts to shoot anyone most of the time. So he just gets arrested. Well, most people, I mean, think of all your neighbors or think of people you meet. How many of them really have the guts to pull stuff like that off? And the ability, you know, not very many people. I mean, so most of the time it's a contrivance. And, you know, you can give an example. I mean, it's been in our films over and over again. They admit it with, like, Lawrence of Arabia. You know, they're dressing up and pretending to be one faction, you know, and I mean, you know, I mean, it's in our lore. And I mean, the original false flag, you'd say, was like the Trojan horse, you know? I mean, they pretended they were, gave up.
Oh, right.
They sail away, you know, and then they come back under cover of night, but they got the giant horse inside the city of Troy, and they're an elite force of their soldiers come out from inside of it because it was, you know, like 2 or 3 stories tall, made out of wood, and they opened the gates. You know, and they had lulled them into a false sense of security, a false peace. Right. But the example, the pertinent example that I wanted to make, well, there's really 2 very, very relevant ones. One of them was COINTELPRO. I don't think you mentioned that. I think you mentioned programs that were associated with COINTELPRO, but COINTELPRO, or Counterintelligence Program, was the formal organization of a Operation Gladio style campaign run by the FBI and CIA against domestic political groups beginning in 1956. But the original program that didn't have this formal organization was really undertaken around 1908. So as early as that, our government was staging false attacks and false events, and then claiming responsibility in the name of political figures and political parties that did not do them, but that they wanted to paint in a bad light domestically. And this is documented. I mean, there's a lot of evidence at this point now, mainly because they don't think people are paying attention, but you can Google COINTELPRO, and that's short for Counterintelligence Program, and it will tell you pretty much the long and short, well, the short version. There are books and more in depth, and depends on how far you want to go. But this is not a new thing. This type of operation really grows out of the elite families' enterprises. Basically, a lot of them, I think you were talking about the pirates and the Templars early on.
Yeah.
And a lot of the pirate and Templar families, what they were doing was trading, buccaneering, and this goes back centuries and centuries. And the thing that they would do would be to run the entire operation as a con, for instance, the pirate William Kidd, Captain Kidd, he operated out of New York City, and he was actually married, I believe, the sister or cousin of like the mayor of New York, who was like Robert Livingston at the time. This was before the United States was a separate country. And he would raid rival ships for the wealthy people who wanted to put certain people out of business. And he actually got a little greedy and raided somebody who was actually an insider, a made man. And that got the elite. Eventually, he did this, and that got the elite mad at him. So then they came after him, and sent other people after him. And he was eventually caught and dragged all the way back to London and hanged in the front of the tower. So yeah, they do get out of control. And of course, the public doesn't figure it out. But so people that are working for them on the inside, they never admit that they're working for them, that they hire a pirate to go rob their rivals, but that's why they get away with it for so long and say, oh, he was this great pirate, and they really just do this all the time. And the Templars would do it. They would go the elite families of America into the 19th century, going all the way in through the Chinese Opium Wars. They would always raid each other's ships, especially overseas. One of the big confluence of pirate organizations was on the island of Madagascar. That's where a lot of pirate ships would go to recharge and gather crews. This is in the 18th and 19th centuries. And this was just well known. And the reason it went on for so long is because a lot of it was sponsored by a lot of these elite families. And they would raid the shipping in the Indian Ocean. And, there was certain targets that were okay to raid and certain targets that were not okay to raid. And if they transgressed, then the British Navy would come after them. But you notice that a lot of pirates, the British Navy really didn't go after them. Not very much, and it was up to certain kings would issue letters of marque for privateers to go after pirates. But the Navy as a whole would not do it because the Navy was under the influence of the royals and certain connected people. So it's always a game. It's always a game.
The Pirates of the Caribbean,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Even Alexander Hamilton, who helped found our banking system, he was the illegitimate son of, I believe, such a royal pirate who was connected to a royal family, minor royal blood, but he was the illegitimate son of this person fathering him in the Caribbean, and they would not acknowledge him. So he came to America, to prove himself or whatever, and so he always felt slighted that he was the illegitimate son of this nobility.
It's always seemed somewhat fascinating to me that England, being such a small island, had at one point controlled such a great portion of the earth.
Oh, yeah. Well, they had the naval technology. That's a long story.
Yeah.
But it is. I want to mention one more thing I don't think a lot of people know about the World Trade Center attacks. People remember the first World Trade Center attack, right, in 93?
Right. That was the bombing in the parking lot or the lower area?
Right. Now, you familiar with the individual responsible for that? His name?
Right, no.
His name was Emad Salam. EMAD SAL. Let me make sure I get it right. EM. Anyway, this guy was an Egyptian intelligence officer that was hired by the FBI to infiltrate this blind sheik and his followers. Well, what he really did was recruit them. They weren't really planning on doing anything. They would preach some, things about Iran really isn't bad or things like that. But he got a group of these guys, and they were pretty much clueless. And the FBI gave him all this money and blueprints to build a bomb, and he didn't want to do it, and he recorded a lot of his conversations, and they eventually said, look, we need you to do this for us. And he had immigrated to America because he wanted to leave Egypt and become an American citizen, so he got a job with the FBI doing this as an informant. He got involved in all this in New York. Anyway, he taped all his conversations. They made him build a bomb when he didn't want to. The people that were in this Blind Sheik movement didn't even know how to build a bomb. The FBI told him to place it in the World Trade Center. They supplied the van and everything. And then he didn't want to do it the whole way through. Anyway, after it blew up and he was partially injured, he went to the hospital afterwards. And then he got like a lawyer. He played the tapes of all the FBI informants telling him, you got to do this, you got to do this, and admitting they're giving him the money and all the technical expertise. And basically they were going to try and frame him. They arrested him, but he had gotten the information out to the papers and his lawyer and before they could suppress it. And so they ended up they were going to frame him for it, and he was going to be the patsy. And he had figured this out because he was in Egyptian intelligence. He'd seen it happen before. So actually they ended up acquitting him and paying $1 million to disappear. And this is in the New York Times. Emad Salam, E-M-A-D S-A-L-E-M, a former Egyptian army officer. And he said he informed the FBI. Anyway, February 6, 92, he just tried to make a timeline and everything. But if you really read about it all, you see that they ended up acquitting him and paying him off, and they didn't even really – they went after the Blind Sheik. But they didn't even name all the other conspirators, really. They didn't really go after him or make a big deal about it. And, of course, the job was botched. The tower did not fall because they didn't even park the van in the right spot. The guy really didn't want to do it, And